loins and invigorates her arms. She discerns loins and invigorates her arms. She discerns that her enterprise is good, so her lamp is not snuffed out by night. Her hand she stretches out, and her palms support the spindle. She spreads out her palm to the poor and extends her hands to the destitute. She fears not snow for her household, for her entire household is clothed with scarlet wool. Luxurious bedspreads she made herself. Linen and purple wool are her clothing. Distinctive in her counsel is her husband when he sits with the elders of the land. She makes a cloak to sell and delivers a belt to the peddler. Strength and majesty are her raiments. She joyfully awaits the last day. She opens her mouth with wisdom. And
we also laughed a lot over what she called yucks. Helene, she would say, I have to talk over a yuck with you and see the best way to handle this, and try to solve the problem. It helped both of us sort out complications of life. You know, life was always complicated if you haven't noticed. Where am I? She was most understanding and there for me when I lost the important people in my life, like my sister Selma, like my son Jonathan, also like my mother, and of course, Herb. She was always there for me and had deep feeling, and I hope sincerely that I was there for her. As I began, we're skipping a lot that I am sparing you since you're standing. As I began, Myra was a force. Also to be honored, to experience, to be enjoyed and loved. She ordered to our world, and the many people she touched and those we never knew she touched. Because you don't know maybe part of Myra, but Myra made an acquaintance of every person she sat next to in the theater, of any person she happened to have a discussion of in a supermarket, or any person who happened to kind of float through her life. When she was in the theater, she made sure to tell them that her son was an actor, and she also made sure to tell her, that's my son on the stage. She was very proud, and well, she should have been. But quiet and shy and retiring, she wasn't. She added to our world in many, many ways, you will see. You will always, there's one thing here that I wanted to say that I thought was funny, and you would enjoy. At any rate, I'll tell you because I do remember it, even without the editor. Myra will always be remembered, no matter what, because she shared with us her many, many pictures, which she sent to us and which she took no matter what we were doing. She would say, picture time, picture time. You could be in the middle of writing your thesis. It didn't matter. Pictures were ultimate. And as I've grown older and have looked through those pictures, Myra, I thank you. You will always be part of us, part of our lives. We all thank you, we all thank you and are thrilled that you have been in our lives. We thank you so much. You made such a difference in our lives.
Auntie Mame, we're so close. As a kid, I saw the movie version of Mame, and I distinctly remember thinking, well, I have my own Auntie Mame, who is one of a kind, who is fearless, and who really thought life was mostly about having fun, that was the work of life. When I try to capture Myra, I think of several different categories of her personality, and I bet we all kind of are going to touch on some of these. The first is her tireless energy and follow through. In the summer of 1999, when Myra was what, 74? Something like that? When was that? I visited with Myra in New York, and I told her about the condo that Ed and I had just bought in Chicago. And she said, oh, I should come out and help you decorate. And I said, oh, that would be fun. And then that was the end of that conversation, and I didn't think anything more about it. But 2 days later, I was back in Chicago, and the phone rang. Judy, it's Myra. I'm looking at my calendar about when I can come out to Chicago to help you decorate. I'm in Paris from August 5th to 12th, and then in Israel seeing Tuvia and his daughters from the 12th to the 27th. So I need to come before then. And she came, and we picked her up at 5:30 in the morning, and she insisted on driving straight to my office, which she thought needed to decorate. Then, of course, is Myra the artist, who loved color and bold design. So some of us are wearing clothing that is totally inappropriate for a funeral, but is completely appropriate for Myra's funeral. I thought I had the cover of my mother, so it was okay. But this is how Myra dressed. We also, she and I and Ed shared the love of Mission Style and Frank Lloyd Wright, and she sent wonderful gifts, coasters and egg cups, and a beautiful framed poster in this style. Just a few years ago, she suggested that Julia and Mom and I come into the city and do a kind of crafts event with her. So we spent the afternoon making fabric art, and she kind of had a new niece-auntie bonding with Julia. Many of you have heard this story, but I love repeating it, and Myra loved repeating a story, and I think it's a good one. Once Myra visited, and she left behind an earring, and I had no doubt it was hers. It was a cloisonné bead, which is this very specific Chinese style, and it was pink, and I knew it was pink. It was clearly pink, but you can't call Myra and describe something as pink, so I thought of a fancier color word. I called her up, and I said, Myra, you left a mauve cloisonné earring in my apartment. And she said, I don't own a mauve cloisonné earring. It must be someone else's. I said, Myra, I'm pretty sure it's yours. So I described it further. And then she said, could it be pink? I have pink cloisonné earrings. All right. The next kind of category of her personality is Myra as urban justice warrior. So Myra was tough, and she called it like she saw it. And sometimes she felt like a little stretching of the truth made her point well. There were many stories that included this theme, but one of my favorites is when the train was delayed and the people were getting antsy, and the conductor kind of was angry back to the people, and Myra said, "Excuse me." All of these stories have Myra saying, "Excuse me," in them. She said, but I'm a psychologist, and may I recommend that if you interacted with the people a little differently, they would react differently to you and things would go better. In her telling, the conductor was very interested and thanked her for the advice. I'm not sure that's what happened. I personally experienced this trait when I broke my toe in her apartment. I was going to help her, and then my 80-something-year-old aunt had to help me, hobbling to the ER in a cab. The cab driver was really awful. He didn't pull close to the ER. He didn't get out and open the door. And so as Myra paid him, she said, you know, she might have said, excuse me, you know, you could have been a lot more helpful. It was just very satisfying. We all know Myra was a storyteller, and I think we'll be telling her stories for decades to come, and I think Julia and other people in the next generation will be telling them. I love all of them, but of course there's one that stands out to us Levine girls above all else, and that is the one about how she put our father, age 3, inside his mother's beloved large vase, and then he got stuck and she couldn't get him out, so she rolled him down the stairs, and then the vase broke, and then she blamed it on Herb, and Herb accepted the blame, which she claims is why she loved him for the rest of her life. So she told this many times on demand, but my very favorite telling was around my parents' dinner table when she used a large Diet Coke bottle, and she held it up and she pretended she was little Herbie stuck in, and she said, "Oh no, Herbie, how will we get you out, and how will you ever go to Harvard?" She might have been slightly annoyed that her parents invested a little more in his education. But most importantly, Myra was always there. She was always there for me, for Jan, for Jonathan, for my parents, for all of you. She was there for us in very tough times. Her support of Jonathan and us when we were losing him meant the world to us. And right up until her stroke, she was always there for me. In fact, just a year or so before the stroke, I was going through something difficult, and she left me a message saying that she is there for me if I ever just wanted to call and talk. And I have to say, I didn't call her back, and I'm really in pain over that, and I'm going to have to get over it. Anyway, I will continue to talk to Auntie Myra and to feel her love for the rest of my life, but I miss her terribly.
But I would like to talk about the relationship of aunts. I had two great aunts, Auntie Selma and Aunt Myra. And it is very painful that they are both gone. But I want to tell you about how I related to my Auntie Myra. It usually went like this. "Hello, Auntie Myra. Hello, niece Jan. How are you?" And then once a year, it was always the question of, "What would you like for your birthday?" And when I was little, it was toys. And then you went through the check stage. And when I was about in my mid to late 20s, this is the conversation. "Hello, Auntie Myra. Hello, niece Jan. What would you like for your birthday?" And I said, "I would like a day with you." And from then on, for my birthdays, Myra and I planned a day. Or shall I say, Myra planned the day. And they went like this. We went to the museum to see the Monet exhibit. And I learned that you should not spend 3 hours in a museum. Myra actually told me that. She said you should spend about an hour and a half and really learn about the paintings. So when I look at Monets now, I understand the lily pads because my Aunt Myra taught that to me. And then we went to Tavern on the Green. Who would think of that for a birthday? And we ate lunch, and I think Myra honestly loved those birthdays as much as I. And when I got older and I owned my own home, we have a furniture theme here, I asked Myra if she would go furniture shopping with me. And she was so thrilled because I think her own children were sick of that. But going furniture shopping with Myra was not going furniture shopping. It was 5 of 9 at 200 Lexington Avenue so that you could get in and see all the furniture in one day because I only had one day. And we would start in the morning and we would look at furniture upon furniture upon furniture, and then at 11:30, I don't know how she had this, she pulled out a menu, and it was from the deli next door. And she said, "What do you want to eat for lunch?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "If you don't choose what you want to eat for lunch now, we will waste an hour in the deli because at noon there are a lot of people." Now, if anyone knows me, picking out what I want for lunch is not something you do in 30 seconds. But I did obey Myra so that we could get through the day. But one of my favorite memories of Myra and the furniture is that we spent all day picking out the perfect furniture for my office in Philadelphia. And we decided that we would get a dining room table rather than a desk. And we drove the man crazy. Me and Myra, he really deserved a commission. And at 4 o'clock, when we walked out, I was walking with my Auntie Myra, and I looked over and I saw a desk that I liked better because it was a farmer's desk, as Myra said, with drawers. That made more sense for an office. So I turned to Myra and I said, Myra, I think that desk is better. And she said, so do I. We're going to do it all over again. And so I always remember Myra as a force, whether it is looking at a museum, whether it is picking out furniture. It was that force of getting things right, of the quality that you're going to live with, and the fulfillment of life. That was really Myra. And although we all talk about Myra and purple, and yes, we are wearing Myra clothes today, I tried to look like MoMA. The necklace comes from PAFA in Philadelphia, a museum. The earrings come from the craft show. They are skateboards. It's really not the clothes. It is really the design and the living of life that I will always remember.
This great looks right. Heading to the table, she sees Chaya shackling with a prayer book in her hand on one side of the living room. On the other side, she sees Hinda standing on her head doing yoga. And then she says to herself, am I the only normal one here, just eating a grapefruit? Our appreciation of Savta was not only based on her visits. Our parents brought us up as if Saba and Savta lived down the block. When I moved to New York, she was a constant figure in my life, and my tour guide, through her eyes, I got to see art, and I developed my love for the theater. I loved going to the museum with her, especially to the MoMA where she volunteered. Joe and I visited her whenever we could in New York and in Boston. I'm so happy that Emma got to meet her and that Ozzy got to see her and had so much fun playing coffee pot and playing piano at the holiday party in her apartment in the city. And Joe tells me she was always interested in what he was doing and listened as if he was the only one in the world. Her knowledge of art was vast, and he loved hearing when she picked up where she picked up all the art in her apartment. He often tells me that her love for Jack was impressive.
Play in Indiana in the middle of the winter 5 years ago. Then 88-year-old Myra went to see the play. She traveled much of the way on her own, even taking a bus, I believe, from the airport. She had tremendous stamina, despite her age and fragile body. In Indiana, we went to see Rob's show, which ended around 10:30 p.m. I was exhausted and ready to go back to the hotel, but Myra made everyone go out for a drink or coffee afterward to discuss the play and life in general. This was a perfect example of what made Myra so special and made us all love her. She was devoted to her family, and in particular was zealous about nurturing their artistic talents. She cherished her family both by hosting conversations, but by showing how much their achievements mattered to her. Because she made us all feel like our lives really mattered, we in turn took ourselves and our relationships a bit more seriously. I've long been impressed by how the Hellers show up to each other's events, and I don't doubt this is Myra's influence. I'd like to think that Myra stuck it out as long as she did to make sure her two most recent grandchildren were born happy and healthy. Because she was there in person so often over the years, it is not hard to imagine her there in spirit for many events to come. Nice. So I've been to a number of funerals and services where we mourn someone who left the world too early. And I felt so in peace thinking about Myra and writing these remarks yesterday, because she lived such a long life and she stuck around. And I think that her timing was just right, which is hard to imagine for someone who always got to the airport 4 hours early. But as a result, we now get to celebrate a long life lived well. Stephen Sondheim wrote about children and art. To Myra, it was family, friends, and art. She loved the beauty of the world, and she loved people. To Myra, life was just so full of beauty that she had to wear it, generally in shades of purple and turquoise, visit it, choreograph it, design it, photograph it, often forgetting to remove the lens cap, and invite her family and friends to experience this beauty with her. Myra's world became our world. In my mind's eye, my childhood was a spectacular blur of outings with Myra, art museums, theaters, architecture, and parties choreographed by Myra, fetes for relatives, special occasions, the family get-togethers in the Catskills or Cape Cod, always, of course, with the Powells and Levines, dinner parties, speeches, cheese plates, little Frankfurters. At an early age, she taught me the phrase festive and gala. When I was young, I just assumed that everyone's grandmother sent them envelopes every couple of weeks stuffed with recent photos and New York Times clippings about Frank Lloyd Wright. She was a spectacular grandmother, and most of the time I appreciated her love and affection, although her efforts to ensure my happiness may have gone too far when, before I met Diana, of course, she would flag waitresses at restaurants to ask if they were single. I owe so much to Myra. She had a tremendous impact on my life, in many ways that were evident at the time and in others that have slowly revealed themselves as I got older. She loved her friends and family so much, and she was so proud of us all, but I think nothing made her prouder than when Adam was in a show on Broadway. During those periods when I came to visit Grandma, she would say, "Gregory, let's go to the theater today." Inevitably, we would end up seeing the show that Adam was in. I don't really know how many times I saw Les Mis and Victor Victoria, but it was a lot. When we went to another of Adam's shows, American Vaudeville, this time in Houston, we were sitting about 10 rows back. That was too far from the stage, and she spotted 2 empty seats in the front row and suggested we move up there. Thankfully, no one showed up late to claim the seats. Unbeknownst to us, at one point in the show, Harry Houdini always chose a child from the front row to perform a trick with him on stage. And that night, I was the lucky boy, thanks to Myra's chutzpah. She taught me that a little chutzpah can go a long way to enhancing our enjoyment of life. She took me to the Kennedy Center to see Will Rogers' Follies. Adam wasn't in that one. And in the box below us was the Clinton family. She encouraged me at intermission, "Why don't you go downstairs and try and talk to Bill Clinton?" I was hesitant at first, but I agreed to do it. It worked, and amazingly, Bill Clinton spent his intermission chatting with a teenager. She taught me to take risks and push my comfort zone. Myra was amazingly good at talking her way into things. She talked her way into numerous sold-out shows and fully booked restaurants. She was also good at talking her way out of things. In London, she talked the Beefeater out of confiscating her film when she photographed the crown jewels. She knew she wasn't supposed to photograph the crown jewels. And the proof is in the 1994 photo album if you want to see for yourself. Myra enjoyed the company of complete strangers who quickly were no longer strangers. Most of you have probably heard this story. She took Rob and me to Washington, D.C., and at the Lincoln Memorial, a kindly woman agreed to take our photo. Myra, of course, got into a conversation with her, and it turned out that she lived on the same street as the only other person that she knew in South Africa. She taught me you should always talk to people because you never know when a stranger could become a friend. The joy of Myra's world was exhilarating, but the routine of Myra's world also gave me great comfort. I never had to wonder whether we would go out to coffee after theater. We always did. I never had to wonder if there would be a wheel of Brie and Jarlsberg on the table at a party. It always
she convinced the security guards to turn the entire plane around so that she could board. I had the privilege of spending 3 summers living with Myra and Jack in New York when I was in grad school in Indiana because I had nowhere to live. So I saw a very different side of them. And of course she was social and all of those sides. But what I remember most was we had a party at the house, at the apartment, which I was also there for a host for because I lived there. And it was a great party, and by this point she had begun losing her eyesight. But she didn't let anyone know. It wasn't about her. It was never about her. It was about everybody else. And after the party, she made me sit down and describe all of the gifts she had been given and the photographs and who the people were in the photographs. And I sat down with her and described in detail all of these things so that she could appreciate them. But in the moment, no one felt that she didn't know what she was getting or that she wasn't appreciative. She was always appreciative. And that was a beautiful private moment that I don't think a lot of people got to see. I'll always remember to sit soft. All of my friends know how to play coffee pot now. I realized recently that I have a very wide group of friends, and apparently they don't hang out together when I'm not there. And I didn't realize this. And I think that's something I got from Grandma. And they say, you know, it's only when you come to New York that we all come together. And I think that was the most important thing she taught us. And as Greg said, I hope we take over the mantle because she was a force of nature. And I'll miss her.
I thank Kathy for the last few years of moving Mom and Dad up to Boston. It's a mutual decision. It's the best thing that we could have done. We all know that Mom was an artist. And we all know that artists don't look back. Mom's canvas, as we've heard this afternoon, were her family, her friends, and her acquaintances who became friends. Her colors were the three primary colors. Her warmth, red, that we've heard stories about, that she could meet someone and they jumped from an acquaintance to a friend. And the time that she spent with her granddaughters, her children, her friends, wherever they were, whether they were in Israel, whether they were in Brooklyn, whether they were in Stony Brook, whether they were in Prague, and her special relationships with Lainey, and I thank all of Lainey's kids for being here today, and a special relationship with Helene. Thank you for your words. She was also very natural. That's blue. She's as natural as the sky. She's a little cloudy today, but we can all imagine. She was really natural. She shot from the hip. She never hid what she wanted to say. She always came out with it. I remember once she didn't like a certain dish. Once I came to New York because my father was in a hospital. Every night I went to a different glatt kosher restaurant in Manhattan. There was one time the food was a little not on the heated side. So she didn't eat the food. She asked the waiter to please warm it up. That's how she was. And then we have Yellow. She was very vivacious, and as we have heard, she was like the life of the party. In fact, she made the parties and she brought them to life. But she was also a mixer. She would mix the yellow and the blue to have green. Green, she was natural. She flowed with things. And she also mixed red with yellow, which is orange. Now, I remember in the house in Stony Brook, she always used to have Tropicana orange juice. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about her joy, her enthusiasm in everything that she did. So here we are today, and she was a real mother. I know I can't even remember all the times that I used to call her on the phone and just schmooze about things from Jerusalem, Israel, to Stony Brook, to Manhattan. Wherever she was always there. She had a very special relationship with Chaya. She had a very special relationship with my 5 daughters, and she even spoke a few times with her great-grandchildren. So we're all here today, and at the end of eulogies, you're supposed to say what lessons that the person imparted to us. So I have a very special thing that I learned from my mom, and that is that she never degraded another person. In the Hebrew language, we say lashon hara. She never spoke lashon hara on anyone. I never heard her run down anyone. And she told me a story that I like to share, that once she was in Manhattan and she was in a taxi, and the taxi driver started running down blacks. So she didn't want to hear this, so she knocked on the divider and she said, "Excuse me, my husband is a black man." And of course the driver stopped. Now this is unbelievable, and this shows that if you mix red and blue, what color do you get?
Purple.
You get purple, and that's the color of royalty.
I think most of you know me. For those of you who don't, my name is Dan Bioli. I'm Kathy's husband. But more importantly, at least for today, I am also Myra's favorite son-in-law, which is a moniker that I truly treasure and always have. There are many things I learned from Myra, too many to mention here, but there's one lesson learned that I don't think Myra knew she was teaching, but one I have come to now understand. Whenever the entire Heller family was together, Hellers, Levines, Powells, and many, many others, Myra insisted that whatever event was planned for the moment, whether it be going for ice cream in Dennis on Cape Cod, or going around the corner to 57th Street to Angelo's for pasta or pizza, it was imperative that we all had to go together. No absences, no excuses. It didn't matter if it was 8 of us or 30 of us. We had to go together. And ideally, we all had to be seated at one table. Her insistence on this drove me crazy. It wasn't until later in my life, as our lives filled with children and grandchildren, that I came to appreciate and understand her passion behind this demand. Myra savored each and every moment that she could spend with her family and friends. She treasured those times, and of course, how better to enjoy family and friends than in a non-stop communal event with attendance mandatory. I'm sure she's looking down now at this gathering, happy that we are all here, and about to say, "Let's sit soft." Thank you for the lesson, Myra. I appreciate it. I also want to acknowledge the dedication and love shown to Myra and Jack by my lovely wife, Kathy. The last few years have been a true challenge, and she has met them with love, never-ending patience, understanding, humor, and compassion.
To decor, to her outfit. She even had her makeup professionally done, complete with false eyelashes. You may notice that I'm wearing Mom's jacket, and she was very proud to have her 5 minutes of fame photographed in this jacket by a New York Times photographer at an art opening.